Hey, what's going on? This is Marcos. Today I want to bring you another conversation I had with a director of photography. His name is Tyler McPherron. You can find him at tylerturtle.com if you want to check out his work before we jump into the conversation. I wanted to talk to him and get his perspective on going from a videographer to a director of photography. I want to know what the difference is, what is the journey like, and any insights he could give us. So there'll be timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead. So definitely a great conversation. You want to listen to this whole thing if you're in that position where you want to go from videography to doing cinematography kind of work. So without further ado, let's jump into our conversation. All right. So maybe we can start with a little bit about your history, how you got to where you are today. I see you do music videos and you do commercials. Is that your bread and butter?
Yeah, mostly like commercials and corporate stuff is my bread and butter these days.
Is it one that you enjoy more than the other?
I get something from every job, even if it's like feels like a plug and play interview shoot that I've done 1,000 times.
Right.
Like there's always something to be learned, doing something differently, different kind of framing, different lighting, working with different crew. Like, I think so it's hard to say like what I like better. I mean, I like working on jobs that are well crewed, that have like a big crew so that I can more focus on doing my job as well as I can. But at the same time, I also really like doing some small crew things where it's like me and maybe like a director who's also running sound and we're shooting a documentary. Like I also love being close to something that feels intimate, whether it's somebody making music or I recently just worked on a documentary about a disabled like strongman weightlifter, and I got to hang out with like him and his family through some highs and lows, and I also really like that on like really empathetic kind of filmmaking. At the same time, I like working on a 40-person crew to like make a commercial for Facebook or something. It's just, I kind of like both of those ends of things. And there's definitely some stuff in the middle that's like not as glamorous. But over time, I've gotten better at like weeding out the kinds of jobs I don't want to do and try to just focus on the kinds of ones that I know I like.
You've become more selective. You earned that right to be more selective.
I guess.
To some degree.
Yeah, I've gotten lucky.
Does it get easier over time to get work and easier to make a living? Because I know when I started it, when I was part-time, it's like, I wonder when I can go full-time with film and video production.
Yeah.
And so, over time, for me, yeah, it's easier, but it's still, there's that worry that what if I don't have a next job next month or it's completely dry? I don't know if you ever get over that.
There's been times where I feel like I have gotten over it. And then, of course, the pandemic this past year really just like brought that all back. But yeah, I think I have mostly gotten over that. It just took a really long time. Like repeated years of like, okay, I made this much last year doing my job, and I made that much the year before, or like a little bit less. And it's like seeing enough years where it was like,
sorry, I forgot about my phone.
Right.
Cut that out. It's my mom. She always does this.
No, answer your mom.
My mom's always like, she always calls me in the middle of shoot. It's funny.
She knows. She's
Sorry
like, my sun
that.
is shining right now.
So it's just gone, consistently, you still, you're looking at your income and like, okay, I made this much, but it's more consistent over time.
I think, I don't really know if talking about income is the right, I guess it's kind of what it boils down to, but it takes time to like get past the feeling of like, is this gonna last? Am I gonna be able to do this all the time and feel secure about it? And yeah, it takes a long time. And eventually I feel like it's kind of gone away for me. But it still comes back and when things are slow.
Yeah.
Another part of it is like, I find there to be waves in work, like definitely times of year where it's slower, and I can just kind of anticipate that. Certainly like December, January, February tend to be slower, and the first couple of years that I was feeling that, it was like, I might never work again, or like, how am I going to do this? And then of course like March comes around and things start to pick back up through the fall.
Yeah. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how you came up.
Sure.
Different people come up. It's always fascinating to me how people get their start and so how what their journey is. So maybe you can share with that.
It's really fascinating to me too. I love hearing about it because I feel like the way that I landed where I am in my career is like, doesn't feel like the standard way, or I always felt like I didn't really come up in like a qualified way for some reason, even though I know everyone's story is different, but I was doing a broadcast journalism program when I was in college, and I knew that didn't quite satisfy like my creative sort of needs, but it was exciting in that I could work with cameras and editing and like learn how to do that kind of stuff. Then I kind of discovered this digital media art program at the university, and that was like way more creative and like got me excited about playing with Photoshop or Final Cut or working with cameras in a completely different like non-news sort of manner. So I actually ended up getting a double major, one in broadcast journalism and one in digital media art. And so I kind of had these two sides of like really experimental kind of playing with editing and cameras, and another of like much more practical, you can make money this way, sort of way of working with cameras and editing. And but it took me a while to feel like I could be creative, or that was something that I was able to.
You didn't have
to
that
be.
identity of.
No, I didn't.
It
Didn't
takes
trust
a while,
myself
right?
for a long time.
It takes a while to develop that identity to say, I guess I am creative, and even to develop the belief that you can make a living doing creative things, or like running cameras.
Yeah.
So what happens after you graduate college with these degrees?
I still struggle with feeling like I'm creative.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I have a very creative job, but I think it's just like this, there's just always people doing different things, or things that I want to do that I'm not doing, or like, it's just like an ongoing struggle. So I had an internship in college at a PBS station, and then that internship turned into a full-time job after I graduated. So I ended up working in the production department at this like local public broadcasting station that did like some of their own production. There were documentary style shorts, kind of news style shorts, live like call-in programs where it's like a round table with 6 thinkers or experts answering like questions from from people calling in or whatever. So it was like kind of all over the map. But I got to get really hands-on working with lights and working with cameras, and it was such a small department that even in my first like couple years there, I get sent out on my own to like go shoot stuff. I just got really fortunate that I like stumbled into this role of being able to work in production and learning from professionals right after college.
That's great. I mean, I think about that too, because relating back to how I started, it was freelance from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I always wanted an employer, someone to fund my video, wanting to do that as a job, and I just couldn't find it. So I always find it fascinating when people do find someone or they get a job doing that, and I think it's a great starting point, because you get to work with other people that are more experienced. You get to do it full time, all the time, as opposed to whenever you get a gig, or trying to get that experience through your own efforts.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I did.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it was definitely a leg up to get to work at the PBS station. And so yeah, I had that like secure job that was in the field that I was generally interested in. And I was learning a lot, working with great people. I had a lot of autonomy and got to work on projects that I liked. Like ultimately I shot and edited like an hour-long documentary that the station put out that, you know, was definitely a collaboration between me and a bunch of other people, but like I got to shoot most of it and I got to edit most of it, and it was just like something to hang my hat on. But I think I had desires to work in a bigger market, to be able to do things that were beyond what I was seeing around me. And that's when I moved to San Francisco, just to be somewhere that had like more potential to do bigger things, and also was somewhere that I really liked and wanted to live and was excited about. And that's sort of when I went freelance.
You went freelance.
When I went freelance, but I didn't know anyone in San Francisco that did video in any way. So I ended up like working for a bike company for a while, assembling bikes, and would just like put it out there in the world, like when I'd meet people that like I do video work and I'm trying to meet people that do similar kinds of work. And just randomly I met somebody that worked at a production company, and after a while I got hired at a production company and was able to quit my job at a bike factory basically. And it's just like for me it was just like a process of meeting more and more people within the industry. And you know, through that production company I met this director who had another production company who I ended up working for right after that. And then we did this big documentary project across the country for like a year. And he's like now my best friend, and we, you know, work on stuff together all the time. And it's just been kind of random. It's been, trying to figure out where I was going with that. Maybe we just cut that.
Well, I mean, it's just like this one contact you made, you know, or you were putting out into the world that you did video. You were freelancing. When you encountered this first production company, did they hire you, or were you a freelancer?
So when I met the first production company I worked for in San Francisco, I worked like some freelance jobs for them. It was kind of an anomaly though. They had a bunch of people on staff making things. It was kind of like a startup thing.
Yeah.
And then I ended up working for them full time for a year or two.
When you were freelancing, did you find that stressful, or were you getting enough work?
So I didn't truly go freelance until 2013. And that was after working for 2 different production companies in San Francisco. And the last production company that I worked for, they dissolved. And that's kind of what set me out into the freelance world. And I was a little bit like scared of that. It's not cheap to live in San Francisco.
No.
And, you know, I didn't really have a lot of connections outside of the companies I had worked for. But my friends at that production company that dissolved, like, encouraged me to try freelancing out, and just helped me understand my own value in a way. Like, kind of told me how much I should be charging to do things, and just gave me the confidence I needed to kind of go freelance. And
let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
So I want to know more about that, because when I was starting out, I really wanted to work for a production company. I reached out to a couple.
Yeah.
They're just like, no, sorry. But I was freelancing all this time, but I wasn't a full-time freelancer. I had a day job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in retrospect, you can only be grateful. You're grateful for everything that happened. And freelance is very different because you don't. A lot of your job description is being a business owner, not necessarily just a creative.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to hunt for your work, and
Yeah.
it's very different. So, can you talk a little bit about the differences in what you learned? Once you've been in both worlds.
It's been a long time since I've had like a full-time regular job at a production company, but I know that it afforded me guaranteed work, guaranteed income, and security. What it didn't guarantee me was autonomy, creativity, and being my own boss, which are all things that I feel like I have a lot more of as a freelancer. But I certainly don't have, the same kind of security, the same kind of constant work opportunities. And I'm just much more like on my own and I'm not like doing video work all the time like I would be if I worked full time at a production company. So I think there's a lot of value in working with a company that's doing the kind of work in some form that you want to be doing, because then you just get like, it's like boot camp in a way.
You're working all the time.
Yeah, you're working all the time.
You get your practice all the time.
Yeah, exactly. You're working all the time, you get your practice all the time. And, certainly everything gets a little bit old when you're doing it for someone else, or, not a lot of production companies even have staff anymore, or like very much staff. There certainly are some, but I think those opportunities are maybe a little more limited than they used to be. Because, one thing that I think of is like, it used to be that if you wanted to be an editor, for example, who could like buy an Avid setup or whatever. Like, I don't even know how much that costs. Probably tens of thousands of dollars. So that's why a production company would own one of those, and then they'd get to work it all the time. But now if you have like an iMac and a Adobe Cloud subscription, you can be an editor who is freelance and works from home.
The market changed.
Yeah.
Considerably. Like,
oh yeah.
It allows for people to work remotely, to not have to spend as much money to get started, right? The barrier to entry is just much lower. So I want to hear more about your freelance though. Once you got into freelance, what was that experience like? How did it take you a while to get your feet planted and feel like you're okay? I kind of know what I'm doing here.
Yeah. Once I started working as a freelancer, it definitely took me years to sort of get my feet planted and know what I was doing. And it just always evolved too. When I started freelancing, I had just been doing a lot of editing at the production company I worked at before I went freelance, and also some shooting. So when I first went freelance, I was, kind of advertising myself as like a videographer and an editor, or maybe like a, director of photography and an editor. And after a while, I just realized that I liked shooting more than editing, and sort of just focused on shooting versus trying to get paid for editing, but would still take editing gigs here and there. I think most of my work that I first got as a freelancer was in some way connected to my previous job. Like the people that I had worked with at the production company that dissolved, that producer and I, so the producer from the production company that I had previously worked for, who was also now freelance, she and I got to work on some projects together where you know, maybe the client came to me and I needed a producer, and I like brought her on, and we tackled it together. And then a director that I used to work with at that production company would need like a DP to shoot a project with him, and I got freelance work that way, and then it just sort of like bubbled out from there. Also, I think there's a bit of my initial freelance work that came from working with this group called Yours Truly, which was just kind of like passion projects where we'd go film bands recording live in a recording studio. It'd usually be like 2 cameras, me and a couple friends that worked at this, or like had this little company, would just go shoot bands performing, and then do a quick interview and make something out of it. And it was really like artsy, and it was like always really good taste in music and up and coming bands. And sort of through that work, I was sort of able to connect to people outside of my like previous network in a way, or become known for doing that in some way. And it's just like more.
Wait for it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, what I'm seeing is that all these connections,
Yeah.
you know, these connections that you're making lead to future work.
Yeah.
And so, you know, how much though is it about the actual work you're producing? You know, because if you're not at a certain level, people might not want to work with you again, or if you don't vibe together.
Yeah.
You know, so it's the connections, but also how much is about connections versus being super talented, and
Yeah, it's all multifaceted. Yeah, you know, it's all. Yeah, I think, you know, if somebody makes really nice looking work, but they're a jerk to work with, like they're probably not gonna get hired a lot by the same people. Or they might not have a very good reputation. If somebody makes maybe not the best looking work and they're really nice, I feel like they maybe have a better shot at, you know, getting hired again, or I don't know. It's just, what am I trying to say here? I think every part of the process is multifaceted. It's like being good to work with, having skill and talent and practice, knowledge, like all of those things go together, I think. So it's, and luck also.
A little bit of luck works. A lot of
good
luck
fortune
works better.
and connections. Yeah.
Connections.
I mean.
But I mean, yeah. Okay. Here's the thing I've seen. You know, I work with different people, and I see certain videographers that, oh, I have 35 years of experience, but their style is stuck, you know, still like the 90s. You know, it got stuck in that place. You know, so experience doesn't necessarily mean that you get better at things. Sometimes it just means you're creating the same thing.
Yeah.
So how have you approached filmmaking or video production, and so, because I see the work you're producing, it's a very high level.
Thank you.
But not everyone does that kind of work. And what separates a videographer from a cinematographer or DP?
An important part of like growing the quality of work has to do with challenging myself, or getting out of my comfort zone when the opportunity strikes, and that's hard. It can be hard to be like it can be hard to be sort of like punching above your level, and can make you feel really insecure and really kind of scared. But you know, anytime, I feel like the only times that I really grow as a cinematographer is when the work that I'm doing is challenging in some way. So if I'm just sort of like always doing the same thing, yeah, it can get stale, and I can see how somebody's maybe quality or style might not really evolve if they're kind of only staying within their comfort zone and only sort of doing the same thing. And that's totally fine. I mean, this work can be whatever you want it to be. It can be just like a job that you clock in, clock out, or it can be, you know, a creative outlet, or it could be, you could be going to Hollywood to make like big budget features. I think there's so many different ways to do this kind of work.
Now, when you see something that's like, when I see something that's like super cinematic and high quality, I think to myself, wow, that's amazing. How is that created, and who created that stuff? Then I see videography work, and it's hard to explain what the difference is. It's just like you can see it, you can feel it, and when something is produced at a high level. So what are the elements of something that has that feeling of a cinematic high quality?
It comes down, there's so many different elements that are at play between like something that feels like videography and something that feels like cinematography. When I think about the term videographer versus the term director of photography, at first I didn't really know what the difference was, and I didn't know what to call myself. I think just at like a core level, like functionality wise, I see a videographer more as somebody who is working in maybe a smaller crew and taking on a lot more roles. When I did videography kind of work, I often was like playing a bit of a producer, a bit of a director, a bit of like, I didn't have a camera assistant. It was just like, I've got all this gear and I gotta like shoot this thing, and it could be shooting a commercial, but to me a videographer is more of like a one-person operation. Yeah. Or it could be two or three, maybe there's a producer or a sound person, but it's its own sort of craft, and I think it suits certain people, and certain people can do it really well, and it's like has its own value because you can be like really independent and be getting a lot of work that way. I see a director of photography more as somebody who's working on like a set with other crew, and they're sort of the head of their department, and their department is pretty much everything you see in a way. So as a director of photography, you work with your lighting team. So you're working with your gaffer and your key grip, and you're collaborating with your production designer, art director. You're often working with like camera assistants and other people, like, you're kind of like the head of this big department, whereas as a videographer, you are all of those departments oftentimes. So it's much more of like a director kind of role. You're not directing talent, but you're sort of collaborating with so many different departments on set to direct the way something looks or feels. And there's just a lot of different skills that are required to be a director of photography versus a videographer. Like, as a videographer, you might be like prepping your camera, or like maybe it just like always is built, and you maybe have like a little like light panel light or something. Then you show up to shoot your interview like that, and then as a director of photography, I might never touch the camera until I show up to set, or like maybe I go to prep and like work with my camera assistant to like build out the camera the way that we want. But the director of photography tends to be like too busy leading up to a shoot to be doing all of the things that like a videographer needs to do. So like I might not have time to build a camera package, and that's so the camera assistant has a whole day to do that. I don't have time to like build out a grip truck and go pick up lights and like do all that. Like my excuse me.
Just heard it's good to
Yeah.
like be reminded of all these things, because as a videographer, I mean that's how I I think a lot of us, that's how we start, and you do everything. You're running sound, cameras, and then you see other work where it's like really high end, right? And you wonder why you're not at that level. And I didn't realize,
Yeah.
well, they have a crew of 40 people,
Yeah.
30, and it's like it's not a fair comparison.
Yeah.
And so, now that you're doing, what are the skill sets you have to learn to get to that point? To me, there's also a level of being intentional and intentionality. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah, it is.
That you want to take on that role, because a lot of people, maybe they don't have that intention.
Yeah.
They're perfectly fine where they're at, and they're happy.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe don't think that they could, or don't think that it's an option.
That's true.
And
Or the how to, how do you even get there? And I think that's part of the reason I do these I like doing these kinds of interviews, because I want to hear what am I not seeing? How come my work is not at that level, right? Or like what the heck am I doing wrong? Or am I doing anything wrong? It's just that maybe I'm not working with the right people. I haven't built the right connections. Maybe I'm not as talented. What is it, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, from an outsider's perspective, what do you think what separates? Is it well, you kind of said that it's multifaceted. It's all these things coming together, but a lot of it has to do with intentionality. You wanted that and you went after it.
Yeah. It's a risk.
It's a risk.
It's taking a risk for sure.
How-
Even compounded on top of the risk of being freelance, compounded on top of like the risk of buying camera gear. It's just like another risk to be like, okay, I just want to be a director of photography. And so that's kind of like the way you brand yourself in a way. Like on your website, for example, or your social media or whatever, if you just like, brand yourself as that it brings you that much closer to becoming a real thing, that like other people will see you that way. And maybe your work's not any better or any different, but when somebody is looking to hire a director of photography, even if it's for a small 3-person crew project or whatever, they're more likely going to look for a director of photography, someone that advertises themselves that way, sells themselves that way, than a videographer. I think.
Yes. No. I mean, I'm glad you're saying these things, because recently, a couple months ago, I thought I needed to brand myself as a production company, because that's the clients I was getting. They wanted me to do everything.
Yeah.
But,
and that's valuable too.
it's valuable, but it's just like, it's not fulfilling at a certain point. It's just like, oh, I'm creating the same thing, and it just looks the same, and it's not that over there that I'm looking at. And I want to create at that level, because it's just like something in you just like lights up when you see those kind of images. So that's what I did. I scrapped the video production company name and all that, and now I said I'm a cinematographer, and it feels a little fake to say that.
Oh yeah.
Like, it doesn't fit me, but I still gave myself that title so I can work towards it.
Yeah.
Totally. And it feels weird. Like, no, I'm not a videographer. I'm a cinematographer.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly, but
Right.
Yeah.
I felt a similar kind of like insecurity and imposter syndrome for a very long time. And there's still jobs that I get that I feel like an imposter on, or I feel like I'm not good enough to be on this job, or I'm outside of my comfort zone, and I'm not used to working with this equipment or this kind of crew or this kind of job. And so just get used to it, because it's going to stick around.
Be okay with that. So, what advice would you give to your younger self? Like, now, looking back, and you're like looking at your college self. You just graduated Nevada, and what would you tell yourself, or like, what would you wish you knew back then?
I think, there's things that I did well, like putting it out in the world that like this is the kind of work I want to do, and trying to meet people in that world, the world of production, in any sort of capacity. That was like my base level. Like I just want to work in production in any way. And I worked as like an extra, I worked as a PA, worked as a grip. Like, I also invested in myself in like buying a DSLR camera, and this is like 2009, right? Like DSLRs are all the rage, and then I had, you know, it was just like a Canon 7D and a 24-70 zoom lens, but I had something that I could go shoot on, and I could, if there was a project I wanted to work on that didn't have money to pay me or rent gear or whatever, it didn't matter. I could like go shoot something that I was excited about. And that was a really good investment. So I think advice I would give to myself, if to maybe do it better or differently, I think I'd probably encourage myself to maybe be even more curious and maybe do something like what you're doing, for example, like reaching out to people who do the kind of work that you want to be doing and asking them questions about it. I'm a bit more shy, I think, about things. Like I have a hard time maybe admitting that I don't know something when I feel like I should. And so I admire it when people are willing to just be like, I don't know this. I don't know the answer to this. I don't know how to do this, even if I feel like maybe I should. I have a friend who does like similar work to me, and he's just so good at asking questions. And you know, it might be like about a light that maybe I have the same question about, like this new LED light, and I'd be standing next to him, and a gaffer is right there, and he would just be like, you know, blah blah blah, like what's this, what does this do, or like how does that work? And like I feel like I should know that, and like I'm embarrassed to ask it. And I just really admire sort of the openness of asking questions about things and being curious. So I would encourage myself to do more of that.
Yeah, I think so. You know, if you, let's say you had a 4-week course and you would have to take this regular person that just does videography, but they want to do DP work, cinematography work. What, you know, you have to teach this class for 4 weeks. What kind of things would you teach them or walk them through to be able to successfully do at least somewhere near the type of work you do? What do you need to teach them, or him or her, for her to get to you know, go from videographer to cinematographer?
I think that would be a really challenging course to put on. Because I feel like I just learned so much on the job and through the process of doing the work, that it'd be hard to teach how to do it without like doing it. So you know, an ideal situation might be like, okay, there's this commercial shoot coming up in 4 weeks. Let's like work together on going through the process of preparing for this shoot up until the shoot day, and then being there on set.
That's good. You know, instead of like all theory, it's more like hands-on. This is an actual shoot. This is not fake. This is a real project.
And it's like, you know, the first couple weeks might, with the way things go on my job sometimes, it might just be kind of boring. Might not be a whole lot going on. You're getting like tidbits of information here and there, and then as it gets closer, things really ramp up. But you do, you know, your director scout and your tech scout, and things start to like solidify. And, you know, sometimes the couple days before a shoot, I'm just like doing prep work for like, you know, 14 hours in a day, or like just like really long days trying to like, I like to be really prepared when like a shoot calls for it. And so sometimes it's not until like a day or two before that I can really think about like, what is the blocking going to be like? Where are we going to light from? What kind of like lighting instruments do we want to have? Yeah, there are so many different aspects that go into it from, yeah, even just from the very beginning when a producer reaches out to, you know, see if you're available to do a job, and even just the process of like putting a hold on, and then, you know, when does it move to being booked, and what does like that sort of, there's a whole sort of language and just like process that even getting booked goes through. And of course, like making sure that you're really clear on your rates, or that that you and the producer have communicated about, you know, how much are my prep days, my travel days, my scout days, my shoot days. Like, there's been times in my past where it's like, you know, it's a process of learning, but like sometimes you don't really price things appropriately, or end up having to do way more work than you thought you were going to have to, and then learning, you know, just taking it as a learning opportunity to be like, okay, next time I need to ask for a prep day, or I need to make sure my scout day is getting paid for, or like sort of those sorts of things.
Isn't it amazing how like a lot of this is just knowing the process?
Yeah.
Like the steps to get there on, depending on the type of project.
Yeah.
And what to look out for.
Totally.
And like every project for me is, as it gets a little bit more involved, it's like, how come I didn't think of that? You know, I thought I was smarter, but it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And
I think about that a lot on jobs, and it's even doing the job. It's like, you might want to make this really like beautiful look, and you have all these references or whatever, but there's so many other steps in the process to even get there, and a lot of things that are almost like out of your control that you can forget about when you're like trying to dream about what a shot might look like or feel like.
yeah,
But it's like, you know, is too much haze in the room gonna make the kid cough who's like the talent or something, you know? And it's like, so, like,
right.
you might not think of that until it happens. And then you might have to learn it again. Or I don't know, that's a random example, but yeah, I think to properly answer like your training course question, I'd have to like think about what the whole process is like.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, because there's just
No
so
worries.
much that goes into
No
it,
worries.
and yeah, every time I get a job, it's like,
You know, at the beginning of my career, it was all about the gimbals and the drones, and like, yeah, those are cool. But to create that visual imagery that, you know, we see in the cinema, it's not about that, right? It's about the lighting, and so it took me a long time to realize like a lot of it has to do with the lighting, and it's not the only thing, but it definitely I feel like it's where I invest a lot of my time nowadays, to just learning and like looking at it and how it reacts, and it's just sort of like a lifelong, you know, just educate. For me, it's just like I'm constantly like learning, and you think you know something, but you have to revisit it over and over again. Just drill it into your head, like, oh, how does face react to lighting, and oh, there's green that's gonna bounce in here, and like you don't know those things until you are conscious of it.
Right. And so, sometimes you have to keep relearning it, like you said.
So is there like certain things you thought like, ooh, this is gonna take me to the next level, and it just ended up being a time waster?
I hear what you're saying about like, you know, being excited about drones and gimbals and feeling like those will be the ultimate thing that leads you to cinematography, and then you realize that it's lighting. That's more where you're seeing the difference between your work and the kind of work you want to be doing. Like, I totally hear that. But I also feel like in some way, your knowledge about drones or gimbals is gonna pay off, is gonna come back to be time well spent learning about those things, because, you know, you might get a client who needs a drone shot, and if you've never worked with drones, and even if it's not like you operating a drone, if you have to hire a drone operator, which is what I would do because I don't want to be the person flying it or whatever, you have this institutional knowledge about about the world of drones. Like you've done shots before. You know, you maybe have ideas of like working through this XYZ space that you might not have had you never experimented with them before. So that's like, it's not wasted time. Same thing with gimbals. Like,
Is that your mom?
no, that's my mom. No, that's just giving me like a 15-minute warning on my.
Oh, we're about to wrap here.
Same thing with gimbals. Like, if you're working as a cinematographer, you're gonna make it to a level eventually where a gimbal is gonna be required on a job. Mm-hmm. And if you've never worked with one before, it can be really intimidating. Yeah. And you having spent time like working with gimbals on your own, even if it's just like, a small like DSLR sized gimbal, you have some sort of knowledge about like what it takes to balance it, like how much weight can it take, like you are gonna be thinking about those things already in some way. So I don't think it's time wasted. And that's for you to judge for sure, but I think what's maybe more important is that like you've realized that that's not the core of where you want to take your career or your artistry, and now you're just noticing lighting more. And so I don't think it's time wasted. I think it's just part of the process.
Yeah.
And you'll spend forever learning about lighting and then realize like, oh, it's actually it's all about camera movement, or like it's all about composition, or it's all about
right. It's always changing.
Right. There's so many different areas that are all like really important. So any time spent working in the field of like training yourself for working with cameras or editing or whatever it is in some way is valuable to me in the way I see it. You also still need to challenge yourself and like take on challenges. And so that's what I see you doing with working towards improving your lighting knowledge and skills.
I guess it's just you make it the main dish in your video work, where the drones and where it's nice to know, but pepper it in,
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't call it to be the main dish.
Right. There's definitely like a certain amount of self-awareness about what where you're spending your time that is important. And being flashy in a certain way can also quickly turn into being like a little cheesy.
Yeah.
And when drones first really like came onto the scene, you'd see like every commercial had a drone shot, and it's like, why? And so it's good to be able to apply that lens to your own work. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's good to hear all these things. I think everything, like you said, it's not just about one thing. It's like how everything comes together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time, and where can people find you? And I'll put a link here down below.
Oh, sure. You can find me at tylermcpherron.com.
Cool.
Which is I'm going to say a shortcut to get to tylermcpherron.com is tylerturtle.com. Easier to spell and just redirects you there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marco.
Hopefully you enjoyed this and you got some great pieces of information. I know I did. I had to rewatch this a couple times because I was editing, and I know there's some really good nuggets in there. If you want to share your comments or your perspective, please do so down below. Also, if you want to see more of this kind of content, please let me know. All right. As always, appreciate you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.